What would you do if someone you trusted threw away 40 years of your memories without asking? I'm Martha, and I'm about to tell you how my daughter-in-law's helpful gesture cost her family everything. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. 3 months ago, I thought I had the perfect family. My son David married Rebecca 5 years back, and they lived just 20 minutes away in their suburban home in Phoenix. Rebecca seemed like the ideal daughter-in-law at first, always bringing homemade cookies to family dinners, remembering my birthday, asking about my garden. She had this way of tilting her head when she listened, like she genuinely cared about every word you said. I should have seen through it sooner. David worked as a software engineer for a tech company downtown, pulling long hours but making decent money. Rebecca stayed home with their twin daughters, Emma and Sophie, who were 3 years old and absolute angels. Every Sunday, they'd come over for dinner at my house on Maple Street, the same house where I raised David and his sister Sarah. After my husband passed away 22 years ago, the house held everything important to me. In the master bedroom closet hung my late husband Robert's favorite fishing jacket, still smelling faintly of the cologne he wore. My wedding dress was carefully preserved in a garment bag, along with the navy blue suit I wore to David's college graduation. There were photo albums tucked into every corner, birthday cards Sarah made me in elementary school, and boxes of letters Robert wrote me during his business trips. Rebecca had been making comments about the house for months. "Oh, Martha, you have so much stuff," she'd say with that practiced smile. "Have you ever thought about minimizing? It's so freeing." She'd run her fingers along my bookshelves, picking up Robert's collection of vintage fishing guides. "You could probably donate half of these books. When's the last time you actually read them?" I'd brush off her suggestions politely. This was my home, filled with my memories. Every item had a story, a connection to someone I loved or a moment that mattered. The ceramic owl on the mantel came from Robert's mother. The quilt draped over. The living room couch was hand-stitched by my grandmother. The collection of coffee mugs in the kitchen cabinet represented 30 years of vacation souvenirs and gifts from friends. Rebecca's persistence increased after David mentioned I'd been having some dizzy spells. The doctor said it was just my blood pressure medication needing adjustment. Nothing serious. But Rebecca latched onto it like I was practically on my deathbed. "David, your mother really shouldn't be managing such a big house alone," she'd whisper when she thought I couldn't. "Here, what if she falls? What if something happens and we're not here?" David would defend me, bless his heart. "Mom's fine, Becca. She's been taking care of herself just fine since Dad died." But I could see Rebecca planting seeds of doubt. During our Sunday dinners, she'd make pointed observations. "Martha, did you forget you already told us that story about the neighbor's cat?" When I absolutely had not repeated myself. Or she'd ask me the same question 3 times in one evening, then exchange meaningful glances with David when I got frustrated. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in September. I had volunteered to watch Emma and Sophie while Rebecca went to what she called an important appointment. She dropped them off at 9 in the morning, looking unusually dressed up in a black pantsuit I'd never seen before. "I'll be back around 4, she said, barely looking at me as she handed over the diaper bag. "The girls had breakfast, but they'll need lunch and probably a nap." I loved having my granddaughters over. We spent the morning in my garden, picking the last tomatoes of the season. Emma helped me deadhead the marigolds while Sophie chased butterflies between the rose bushes. We made peanut butter sandwiches for lunch and read stories on the porch swing until they both fell asleep. When Rebecca returned at 4:30, she seemed agitated. She gathered the girls quickly, barely staying for her usual cup of coffee. "Everything okay, dear?" I asked as she strapped Sophie into her car seat. "Fine," she said curtly. "Just tired. Long day." I thought nothing more of it until the following Monday. I had plans to meet my friend Helen for lunch at our favorite diner, but when I went to my closet to choose an outfit, I stopped dead in, say, my tracks. Half of my clothes were gone. My favorite purple cardigan that Robert always said brought out my eyes. Gone. The black dress I wore to Sarah's wedding. Gone. 3 pairs of slacks, 2 skirts, and my good winter coat, all missing. Even my jewelry box had been rifled through. My pearl earrings, the ones Robert gave me for our 20th anniversary, were nowhere to be found. I stood there in my empty closet, my hands shaking. This wasn't possible. I hadn't moved anything. I lived alone. No one else had keys except for David and Sarah lived in Denver now with her own family. That's when I noticed it. Sitting on my dresser was a small white card that definitely hadn't been there before. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Goodwill Industries, Phoenix location. Thank you for your generous donation of clothing and accessories. Your contribution helps families in need. The donation was dated the previous Tuesday, the day Rebecca had been here with the girls. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the edge of my bed. The receipt listed dozens of items, clothing, jewelry, accessories, everything described in generic terms. Women's sweaters, 6 items, women's pants, 4 items, jewelry, miscellaneous. She had gone through my personal belongings while my granddaughters napped. She had taken my clothes, my jewelry, my memories, and driven them to Goodwill like they were garage sale leftovers. I called David immediately, my voice shaking so badly I could barely get the words out. David, I need you to come over, now. Mom? What's wrong? Are you hurt? Just come, please. David arrived within 15 minutes, still wearing his work clothes. He found me sitting at the kitchen table, holding the Goodwill receipt like evidence in a crime scene. She took my clothes, I said without preamble. Rebecca. She went through my closet and donated my things while she was supposed to be watching the girls. David's face went through several expressions. Confusion, disbelief, then a dawning realization that made my heart break for him. Mom, are you sure? Maybe I what? Forgot donating half my wardrobe? I handed him the receipt. Look at the date, David. Last Tuesday, when Rebecca was here alone. He studied the paper, his jaw tightening. There has to be an explanation. The explanation is that your wife violated my privacy and threw away my personal belongings without permission. David pulled out his phone and called Rebecca. I could hear her voice through the speaker, bright and cheerful, until David asked her about Tuesday. Oh, she said after a pause. I was going to tell you about that. I thought it would be a nice surprise for Martha. A surprise? David's voice was dangerously quiet. She has so many clothes she never wears. I thought I'd help her declutter. You know how overwhelming it can get for people her age to manage all that stuff. I snatched the phone from David's hand. People my age? Rebecca? Those weren't just clothes. That purple cardigan was Robert's favorite. My pearl earrings were a gift from my husband. You had no right. Martha, I was trying to help. You have way too much stuff in that house. It's not healthy for someone your age to be hoarding. Hoarding? The word came out as a whisper. You think I'm a hoarder? Well, not hoarding exactly, but you do hold on to things that aren't really necessary anymore. I was doing you a favor. David took the phone back. Becca, you need to come over here, right now. I can't. The girls need dinner and... Now, Rebecca. She arrived 30 minutes later, walking into my kitchen like she was the one who'd been wronged. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, her makeup flawless, her expression set in that practiced look of patient concern. Martha, I really think you're overreacting, she said before I could speak. Those clothes were just sitting in your closet. When's the last time you wore that purple sweater? Or those formal dresses? I bet some of them still had tags on them. That's not the point, David said. You went through Mom's personal belongings without permission. I was Helping, Rebecca insisted. David, you've seen how cluttered this house is. Your mother is getting older, and all this stuff is just weighing her down. I thought if I quietly removed some of the excess, she'd feel lighter, freer. My pearl earrings weren't in excess, I said quietly. They were from my husband. Rebecca's expression softened slightly, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. Oh, Martha, I'm sorry about the jewelry. I didn't realize those had sentimental value. I just grabbed things that looked like they weren't being used. Everything in my closet has sentimental value. This is my home. But that's exactly the problem, Rebecca said, her voice taking on that patient tone people use with children. You're holding on to the past instead of living in the present. All these old clothes, old photos, old everything. It's not healthy. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. David stood up abruptly. Becca, stop. Just stop. David, your mother, needs help accepting that it's time to let go of some things. I was trying to make it easier for her. By stealing from her. I didn't steal anything. I donated items to charity. Items that were just collecting dust. I looked at this woman who had sat at my dinner table every Sunday for 5 years, who had hugged me at Christmas and called me Mom on Mother's Day, and I realized I didn't know her at all. Get out, I said quietly. Martha. Get out of my house. Rebecca looked to David for support, but his face was stone. You should go, he said. We'll talk about this later. After Rebecca left, David and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was thinking about doing something like this. She's been planning this for months, I said. All those comments about decluttering, about me having too much stuff. She was building a case. I'll talk to her. Maybe some of the items are still at Goodwill. Maybe we can get them back. I shook my head. It's too late for that, and it's not really about the clothes, David. What do you mean? I looked around my kitchen, at the ceramic rooster cookie jar Rebecca always rolled her eyes at the wall of family photos she'd suggested I streamline, at the collection of recipe cards from my mother that she'd called clutter. She thinks, my life is something to be cleaned up and thrown away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept opening my closet door and staring at the empty hangers, the gaps where my favorite things used to be. I thought about Rebecca going through my jewelry box, deciding what I did and didn't need. I imagined her explaining to the Goodwill worker that these were donations from an elderly woman who had too much stuff. The next morning, I called my lawyer. My lawyer, Patricia Williams, had been handling my legal affairs since Robert died. She was a sharp woman in her 60s with silver hair and no patience for nonsense. When I called her Wednesday morning, I could barely get through the explanation without my voice breaking. Martha, she said after I finished, I need you to come in today. Bring that Goodwill receipt and any photos you have of the missing items. Her office was downtown in a glass building that made me feel small. Patricia listened as I spread out printed photos from my phone, pictures I'd taken of Robert wearing his fishing jacket, me in the pearl earrings at Sarah's graduation, the purple cardigan and family Christmas photos. This is theft, Patricia said bluntly. Your daughter-in-law entered your home under false pretenses and removed your property without consent. The fact that she donated it doesn't change anything. But she's family. And David? I trailed off, thinking about my son's torn expression when Rebecca left. Family or not, she committed a crime. The question is what you want to do about it? I spent the rest of the week in a fog. David called every day, his voice strained. Rebecca had apparently locked herself in their bedroom and refused to discuss what happened. The twins kept asking why Grandma Martha seemed sad when David brought them over Thursday evening. Mommy did something wrong, Emma had said with 4-year-old directness. Daddy's mad at Mommy. Friday afternoon, Rebecca showed up at my door unannounced. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. "We need to talk," she said. I almost didn't let her in. But curiosity won over anger. She sat on my couch, the same spot where she'd criticized my throw pillows just last month. "I know you're upset," she began. "Upset is when the grocery store runs out of my favorite bread. This goes beyond upset." Rebecca flinched. "I made a mistake. I see that now." "Do you? Because when David confronted you, you kept insisting you were helping me?" "I was trying to help, but I realize now that I should have asked first." I stared at her. "Should have asked?" "Rebecca, you went through my private belongings like a burglar. You threw away my memories like they were trash." "They weren't trash. I know that. She rubbed her face with both hands. "You don't understand what it's like, watching David worry about you all the time." "David doesn't worry about me." "Yes, he does. Every time you mention feeling dizzy or tired, or when you forget something small, he comes home and talks about whether you should really be living alone. He loves you so much, Martha, and he's terrified something will happen to you." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "So you decided to prove I couldn't take care of myself by violating my privacy?" "No, I thought if you had less stuff to manage, less clutter, it would be easier for you, safer, and then David would stop worrying so much. Or maybe you thought if you could convince everyone I was declining, David would agree to put me in a home." Rebecca's face went white. "That's not— I would never— Wouldn't you? You've been commenting on this house, my belongings, my supposed confusion for months. You've been building a narrative. Martha, please, I love you. You're like a mother to me." "Mothers don't steal from their daughters, Rebecca." She started crying then, real tears that smeared her mascara. "I'm so sorry. I know I hurt you. I know I violated your trust. But please, can we find a way past this? For David? For the girls?" I looked at this woman who had manipulated my son's love and concern into permission to dismantle my life, and I felt something harden inside my chest. "I've made an appointment with a financial advisor," I said quietly. "What?" "You were right about one thing. I do need to think about the future. About what happens to my assets when I'm gone." Rebecca's tears stopped abruptly. "Your assets?" "This house. My investments. The life insurance money Robert left me. My retirement accounts. It's quite substantial, actually." I watched recognition dawn in her eyes. Rebecca had always been curious about my finances, asking innocent questions about property values and retirement planning. She knew I lived comfortably in a house that had tripled in value since Robert and I bought it 30 years ago. "Martha, you don't need to—" "I think I do. Your little intervention made me realize I need to be very clear about my intentions." That weekend, Sarah flew in from Denver. I'd called her Thursday night and told her everything. My daughter had Robert's temper when properly provoked, and she was definitely provoked. "I never liked her," Sarah said, pacing around my kitchen Sunday morning. "Remember at the wedding when she made that comment about how you'd probably want to downsize soon? I thought she was just making conversation." She was fishing, testing the waters. Sarah stopped pacing and looked at me. "Mom, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to protect myself." From Rebecca? From anyone who thinks my life needs their management. Monday morning, I drove to Henderson Financial Services. James Henderson had managed Robert's investments and helped me navigate the financial maze after he died. His office was warm and comfortable, nothing like Patricia's sterile corporate environment. "Martha," he said, reviewing my portfolio on his computer screen, "you're in excellent financial shape. The house alone is worth $400,000 now, and your various accounts total another $600,000, plus the life insurance Robert left you. Over $1 million. Closer to 1.2, actually. What are you thinking about? Doing? I pulled out a legal pad where I'd been making notes. I want to set up a trust. Something that protects my assets and makes my intentions very clear. What kind of intentions? I want David to inherit the house and half my financial assets. Sarah gets the other half, but I want conditions. James leaned forward. What kind of conditions? If David is married to Rebecca when I die, his inheritance goes into a trust that she cannot access. Ever. The house would have to be sold, and the proceeds would be held for my granddaughters until they turn 25. That's very specific. I want Rebecca to understand that her actions have consequences. Martha, are you sure about this? These kinds of restrictive trusts can cause family problems. Rebecca already caused family problems. I'm just protecting what's left. Tuesday evening, David came over alone. The twins were at Rebecca's mother's house, he said. Rebecca was taking some time to think. Mom, Becca told me about your conversation Friday. She said you mentioned meeting with a financial advisor. I did. Why? I served him coffee in his father's favorite mug and sat across from him at the Wiles kitchen table where I'd helped him with homework for 12 years. David, do you think I'm losing my mind? What? No. Why would you ask that? Rebecca seems to think I am. All those comments about me forgetting things, about not being able to manage this house, about holding on to too much stuff. David looked uncomfortable. She's just worried about you. Is she? Or is she worried about what happens to this house and my money when I'm gone? Mom, that's not fair, isn't it? Think about it, David. When did Rebecca start suggesting I downsize? Right after you mentioned that property values in this neighborhood had gone up so much. When did she start commenting on my memory? Right after I mentioned updating my will last year. David was quiet for a long moment. You're making her sound calculating. Maybe because she is. She made a mistake, Mom. A big one. But she's not. Some gold digger. Then why did she ask me 3 times last month if I'd ever considered selling this house? David's face changed slightly. She asked you about selling? She said it was too big for one person. That I could get a nice condo and have money left over for travel or whatever I wanted. She never mentioned that to me. What else hasn't she mentioned to you? David left that night looking troubled. I felt bad for putting doubt in his mind about his wife, but I'd seen Rebecca's true face now. The woman who could smile at me over Sunday dinner while planning to ransack my closet was capable of anything. Wednesday morning, Patricia called. I have news about your stolen items. I contacted Goodwill, and they confirmed receiving a large donation last Tuesday matching your description. Unfortunately, most clothing donations are processed immediately. The items are likely already sold or shipped to other locations. So they're gone. Probably. But here's what's interesting. I spoke to the donation center manager. She remembered the woman who dropped off your things because she seemed nervous and kept emphasizing that the items belonged to an elderly relative who wanted to simplify her life. Rebecca was covering her tracks. It appears so. The manager said the woman, matching Rebecca's description, specifically asked for a receipt and wanted to know if donations could be traced back to the original owner. Why would she care about that? Because she was already thinking about potential consequences. Martha, this wasn't an impulsive act of misguided helpfulness. This was calculated. That evening, Rebecca appeared at my door again. This time she looked composed, almost defiant. I know you're trying to turn David against me, she said without preamble. I don't need to turn David against you. You did that, yourself. David loves me. We have a family together. Yes, you do. Which makes what you did even more devastating. Rebecca stepped closer. I made one mistake, Martha. One. Are you really going to destroy my marriage over some old clothes? Those old clothes were my life, Rebecca, my history, my connections to people I loved. They were things, just things. And there it was. The fundamental difference between us laid bare. To Rebecca, my memories were clutter. My connections to Robert, to my past, to the life I'd built. All of it was just stuff taking up space. If they were just things, I said quietly, then why did you make sure to get a receipt? Why did you ask the Goodwill manager about tracing donations? Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. My lawyer spoke to the donation center. They remember you quite clearly. You got a lawyer involved. Rebecca's voice pitched higher. Over some donated clothes? Over theft? Over violation of trust? Over the systematic undermining of my independence and dignity? You're being ridiculous, dramatic. This is exactly why David worries about you. You blow things out of proportion. Do I? Or do I finally see clearly? Rebecca's mask slipped completely then. Fine. You want to know the truth? Yes, I think you hold on to too much stuff. Yes, I think this house is too big for you. Yes, I think you're getting older, and David spends too much energy worrying about whether you're safe here alone. I was trying to help everyone. By stealing from me. By making necessary changes that you were too stubborn to make yourself. Changes you had no right to make. Someone had to do something. David's too nice to tell you the truth, but I'm not. You're holding onto the past so tightly that you can't see the present. Those clothes, those old photos, all this stuff. It's keeping you trapped. I looked at her for a long moment. Rebecca, do you love David? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Of course I do. Then you should know that this house, these memories, this stuff you hate so much, it's all part of who raised him. When you attack my life, you attack the foundation of the man you claim to love. That's not. When David was 12 and his father died, do you know what got him through it? The stories I told him every night about Robert, using things in this house as memory prompts. His father's fishing jacket still hanging in the closet meant Robert wasn't really gone. The photos on the mantel meant our family continued even when it was broken. Rebecca's face was stone. That was then. This is now. And now you've decided my memories are inconvenient. I've decided that living in the past isn't healthy. For whom? For me, or for your plans? What plans? The plans you've been making about this house? About my future? About what's best for everyone without bothering to ask what I want? Rebecca turned to leave, then stopped. You know what, Martha? Maybe David does worry about you. Maybe he sees things you don't want to admit. And maybe I was trying to make his life easier by dealing with problems you refuse to acknowledge. Or maybe you were trying to make your life easier by removing obstacles to what you want. She slammed the door on her way out. That night, I sat in my quiet house and made a decision. I pulled out my phone and called James Henderson. James, it's Martha. I want to move forward with that trust we discussed. And I want to add one more condition. What kind of condition? James asked over the phone. I walked to my living room window, looking out at the garden Robert and I had planted together. If Rebecca ever attempts to have me declared mentally incompetent or tries to force me into assisted living, David loses his inheritance entirely. Everything goes to Sarah and the twins. James was quiet for a moment. Martha, that's a very serious accusation to build into a legal document. It's a very serious threat I'm protecting against. Do you really think she would go that far? I thought about Rebecca's carefully documented comments about my memory, her systematic undermining of my independence, her calculated removal of my belongings. Yes, I do. The trust documents were ready by Friday. Patricia had worked with James to create something ironclad, a legal fortress around my assets that would make Rebecca's motivations crystal clear to everyone involved. That weekend brought an unexpected visitor. Rebecca's mother, Linda Morrison, appeared on my doorstep Saturday afternoon. I'd met her only a handful of times at family gatherings. She was a thin woman with graying blonde hair and the same calculating eyes as her daughter. "Martha, we need to discuss this situation," she said, inviting herself into my living room. "What situation would that be?" Rebecca told me about the misunderstanding over some donated items. Misunderstanding? I almost laughed. "Your daughter stole from me." Linda's expression tightened. "That's a very harsh way to put it. Rebecca was trying to help you manage your living situation." "My living situation is none of Rebecca's business. Isn't it? She's married to your son. She's part of this family. When she sees you struggling with too many possessions, with maintaining this large house, shouldn't she offer assistance?" I studied Linda carefully. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. "Did Rebecca ask you to come here?" "I came because I'm concerned about the impact this conflict is having on my granddaughters. Emma and Sophie are confused about why Grandma Martha is angry with Mommy. Maybe you should ask Rebecca why she violated their grandmother's trust." Linda leaned forward. "Martha, can I speak frankly? You're 73 years old. This house is enormous for one person. You've had some health concerns recently. Rebecca was looking ahead, trying to help you prepare for the inevitable changes that come with aging." Inevitable changes? "Eventually, you'll need more support, assistance with daily tasks, maybe a smaller living space that's easier to maintain." Rebecca was trying to ease that transition. By stealing my clothes and jewelry, by helping you let go of unnecessary attachments, by showing you that you could live with less and be happier for it. I realized then that Rebecca hadn't acted alone. This had been a family strategy, discussed and planned. Linda's visit wasn't about reconciliation, it was about damage control. "Where are my pearl earrings, Linda?" "I beg your pardon?" "My pearl earrings. The ones Robert gave me for our 20th anniversary. Rebecca donated them to Goodwill. Do you know where they ended up?" Linda looked uncomfortable. "I'm sure they went to someone who needed them." "Did Rebecca mention them specifically when she told you about her charitable donation?" "I don't recall, because those earrings were worth $800, and my wedding dress was a vintage piece that could have brought several hundred more." "Rebecca didn't just donate old sweaters, Linda. She took valuable items from my home without permission." "You're making this sound criminal." "Because it was criminal." Linda stood up abruptly. "Martha, I came here hoping we could find a reasonable solution to this family conflict, but I can see you're determined to be difficult." "Difficult? Your daughter violated my home and my trust, and I'm difficult for being upset about it." "You're turning a family dispute into a legal matter. That's excessive. What would be appropriate, in your opinion?" "Thanking Rebecca for deciding what I do and don't need in my own home." Linda's mask slipped slightly. "Maybe acknowledging that she might have a point about your living situation." "There it is," I said quietly. "You think she was right." "I think Rebecca sees things clearly, without emotional attachment clouding her judgment." Emotional attachment. To my own possessions? In my own home? Emotional attachment that prevents you from making practical decisions about your future. I walked to the front door and opened it. "I think you should leave now. Martha, tell Rebecca that if she wants to discuss this situation, she can do it through lawyers. And tell her that attempting to manipulate my granddaughter's emotions won't change anything." After Linda left, I called Sarah in Denver. "Mom, are you okay? You sound shaken." "Rebecca's mother just left. Apparently this was a family decision." "What do you mean?" "They've been discussing my living situation, my supposed inability to manage this house, my need for help letting go of possessions." Rebecca didn't act impulsively. She was implementing a plan. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Mom, I think you need to tell David everything. About the lawyer, the trust, All of it. I will. But first, I want to visit Emma and Sophie. Is that a good idea? They're my granddaughters. Rebecca doesn't get to use them as weapons. Sunday afternoon, I drove to David and Rebecca's house in the Willow Creek subdivision. It was a beautiful neighborhood of new construction homes with perfect lawns and identical mailboxes. Everything designed to look flawless and maintenance-free. David answered the door, looking surprised. Mom, I thought you were coming for dinner later. I wanted to see the girls first. Are they here? They're in the backyard with Becca. But Mom, maybe we should talk before. David, I love you, but I need to see my granddaughters. Emma and Sophie were playing on their swing set while Rebecca sat on the patio scrolling through her phone. When she saw me coming through the sliding door, her face went carefully neutral. Girls, look who's here, she said in a bright voice. Emma and Sophie ran to me, their faces lighting up. Grandma Martha, we missed you. I hugged them both, breathing in their little girl scent of strawberry shampoo and playground dust. I missed you too, sweethearts. Mommy said you were sick, Sophie said, her 4-year-old face concerned. I looked at Rebecca over Sophie's head. Did she? I said you were feeling sad, Rebecca corrected smoothly. Because of a misunderstanding we had. What kind of misunderstanding? Emma asked. Rebecca started to answer, but I knelt down to the girl's eye level. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, sweetheart, but that doesn't change how much Grandma Martha loves you. Are you still sad? Sophie asked. A little. But seeing you makes me feel much better. We played for an hour. I pushed them on the swings, helped them, build a fairy house out of sticks and leaves, and listened to Emma read me a story about a brave princess. Rebecca watched from the patio, occasionally checking her phone but mostly keeping her attention on our interaction. When it was time to go inside for dinner, Rebecca finally approached me. Martha, can we talk privately for a minute? David was in the kitchen preparing burgers for the grill. The girls had run upstairs to wash their hands. Rebecca and I stood alone in the living room with its beige walls and carefully coordinated furniture. Your mother came to see me yesterday, I said. Rebecca's composure flickered. She mentioned that. Did she tell you what we discussed? She said you were still upset about the donation situation. The theft situation, you mean? Martha, please. The girls might hear you. The girls should understand that actions have consequences, even when they're committed by adults. Rebecca glanced toward the kitchen where David was clattering around with plates and utensils. Look, I know you're angry, but can't we find a way to move past this? For everyone's sake? What did you expect would happen, Rebecca? That I'd thank you for deciding what I needed? I expected you to see that I was trying to help. Or you expected me to be too embarrassed or confused to fight back. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly. That's not true, isn't it? Your mother seemed to think I should be grateful for your intervention. She suggested that I'm too emotionally attached to make practical decisions about my future. Maybe you are. The honesty was startling, even though I'd been expecting it. Too attached to what? To things that don't matter anymore. To a house that's too big for one person. To clothes you never wear and jewelry you keep locked away. They matter to me. But why? What's the point of keeping Robert's fishing jacket when it just makes you sad? What's the point of saving your wedding dress when you'll never wear it again? I looked at this woman who had married my son and borne my grandchildren, and I realized she would never understand. The fishing jacket didn't make me sad. It made Robert present. The wedding dress wasn't about wearing it again. It was about remembering the day I became part of something bigger than myself. Rebecca, do you have anything from your childhood? Any keepsakes or mementos? Some things, but I don't build my entire life around them. What about Emma and Sophie? When they grow up and move away, will you want to keep some of their artwork? Their favorite stuffed animals? Photos from their birthday parties? That's different. How? Because they're my children. And Robert was my husband. This house is where I raised David. Those clothes are connected to moments that shaped my life. They're not clutter, Rebecca. They're who I am. David appeared in the doorway. Everything okay in here? Fine, Rebecca said quickly. Just talking. Dinner was tense despite the girls' chatter about school and friends. David kept glancing between Rebecca and me, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand. Rebecca maintained her perfect hostess facade, serving food and wiping faces and asking about my garden. After we ate, while David was helping, the girls with their baths, Rebecca and I found ourselves alone again in the kitchen. I want you to know, she said quietly, that I've been thinking about what you said, about asking permission. And you're right. I should have talked to you first. Should have, but didn't. But Martha, I also want you to understand something. David worries about you constantly. Every time you mention feeling dizzy or tired, he comes home and talks about what we'd do if something happened to you. He loves you so much that the thought of you getting hurt or being unable to care for yourself keeps him awake at night. So you decided to create evidence that I couldn't care for myself? I decided to show that you could live comfortably with less, that downsizing wouldn't be the end of the world by making that decision for me? Rebecca sighed. Yes. And I see now that was wrong. Do you? Or do you see now that it backfired? She looked at me for a long moment. What do you want from me, Martha? What would make this right? I thought about the trust documents sitting in Patricia's office, about the legal walls I'd built around my assets, about the conversation I still needed to have with David. I want you to understand that my life is not a problem for you to solve. Okay. I want you to understand that this house, my possessions, my choices, they're mine to make. I understand. And I want you to understand that trust, once broken, is very difficult to repair. Rebecca's perfect composure finally cracked. Are you saying you'll never forgive me? I'm saying that forgiveness has to be earned. And so far, you've spent more energy justifying what you did than acknowledging why it was wrong. I just told you it was wrong. You told me you should have asked permission. That's not the same thing. David reappeared with the girls in their pajamas. Who wants to read a story before Grandma Martha goes home? We all gathered in the living room, Emma and Sophie curled up on either side of me, while David read them a book about a little owl learning to fly. Rebecca sat across from us, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. When the story was over and I was preparing to leave, David walked me to my car. Mom, is everything really okay between you and Becca? I looked at my son's worried face, thinking about all the conversations I still needed to have with him. We're working through some things. She feels terrible about the donation thing. She's been crying every night this week. David, can I ask you something? Do you think I'm losing my ability to live independently? He looked startled. What? No. Why would you ask that? Rebecca seems to think I need help making decisions about my life. Mom, you're one of the most capable people I know. You've been managing fine since Dad died. Then why did she think it was okay to go through my belongings and decide what I did and didn't need? David was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I really don't understand what she was thinking. Maybe you should ask her. I drove home through the quiet Sunday evening streets, past houses where families were settling in for the night. Normal families with normal problems. Not families where daughters-in-law conducted secret interventions and mothers-in-law consulted lawyers about inheritance trusts. But maybe that was naive thinking. Maybe every family had hidden tensions and competing agendas. Maybe I'd just been lucky enough to avoid them until now. Monday morning, I called Patricia Williams. I'm ready to sign the trust documents, I said, and I want to schedule a family meeting. Are you sure about this approach, Martha? Once you reveal the trust terms, there's no going back. There's already no going back. Rebecca made sure of that when she decided my life needed her management. When do you want to have this meeting? This weekend, Saturday afternoon. I want David, Rebecca, and Sarah all here. Sarah's coming from Denver? I called her last night. She's flying in Friday. Martha, I have to ask, are you prepared for the possibility that this could permanently damage your relationship with David? I thought about my son's worried face, about the way he'd defended me to Rebecca, about the man Robert and I had raised to value honesty and respect. If David chooses his wife's manipulation over his mother's truth, then the relationship is already damaged beyond repair. Tuesday evening, I invited David over for coffee. Just him, no Rebecca, no girls. He arrived looking tired, carrying the weight of a family falling apart. We need to talk, I said, serving him coffee in Robert's favorite mug. About Becca? About a lot of things. But yes, about Rebecca too. I told him about Linda Morrison's visit, about the family strategy that had been discussed and planned. I told him about my conversations with Patricia and James. And finally, I told him about the trust. David's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, hurt, and finally something that looked like understanding. Mom, you changed your will because of what Becca did? I changed my will because of what Rebecca revealed about her intentions. What intentions? The intention to manage my life according to her preferences. The intention to use your love and concern as justification for violating my autonomy. The intention to position herself as the reasonable voice of practicality while painting me as a confused old woman clinging to the past. David was quiet for a long time. She's not like that, isn't she? She made a mistake. A big one. But she's not some manipulative schemer. Then explain her mother's visit. Explain why Rebecca documented her concerns about my memory and independence for months before acting. Explain why she made sure to get a receipt from Goodwill and asked about tracing donations. I can't explain those things, because you don't want to see what they mean. David stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden where he'd played as a child. What do you want me to do, Mom? Leave my wife? Break up my family? I want you to see clearly, and I want you to understand that I won't be managed or manipulated by anyone, family or not. So you're punishing my children for their mother's mistakes? I'm protecting my assets from their mother's influence. The trust ensures that Emma and Sophie will benefit from my estate regardless of what happens between us. But only if I'm not married to Rebecca when you die. Only if Rebecca doesn't succeed in having me declared incompetent or forcing me into care I don't need. David's shoulders sagged. Do you really think she would do that? David, 3 weeks ago, would you have thought she'd steal from me? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I've scheduled a family meeting for Saturday, I continued. You, Rebecca, Sarah, and me. We're going to put everything on the table. Mom, please, can't we handle this privately? We tried handling it privately. Rebecca lied to you about her conversation with me. She sent her mother to try to convince me I was being unreasonable. Private hasn't worked. David looked at me with something that might have been respect mixed with sadness. You're really doing this? Yes, I am. And if Rebecca refuses to come, then she'll be making her choice clear to everyone. After David left, I sat in my quiet house and thought about the family meeting that would change everything. Saturday would bring revelations that couldn't be taken back, truths that would reshape relationships permanently. But as I looked around at my living room full of memories, at Robert's fishing jacket still hanging in the closet, at the pearl earrings that would never again grace my ears, I knew I'd already lost what mattered most. The question now was whether anything could be saved from the wreckage. Friday afternoon, Sarah arrived from Denver looking like she was ready for war. My daughter had inherited Robert's stubborn streak and my protective instincts, a dangerous combination when she felt her family was under attack. Show me everything, she said. dropping her suitcase in the hallway. I spread the trust documents across my dining room table alongside printouts of my conversations with Patricia and James. Sarah read through them methodically, her expression growing darker with each page. "Jesus, Mom, this is bulletproof!" "It needs to be. Rebecca's going to lose her mind when she sees this." "Good. Maybe that will show David who he really married." Sarah looked up from the documents. "Are you sure you want to go nuclear like this? Once you reveal these terms tomorrow, there's no pretending this is just about some donated clothes." It was never just about the clothes. The clothes were just the beginning. "What do you mean?" I walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garden where Robert had taught David to throw a baseball 30 years ago. "Your brother mentioned that Rebecca's been asking about selling this house. She's also been documenting my supposed memory lapses and physical limitations." "The donation wasn't random, Sarah. It was a test run." "A test run for what?" "For taking control. She wanted to see if I'd fight back or if I'd accept her management of my life. If I'd rolled over and thanked her for helping, the next step would have been bigger interventions." Sarah stood up and started pacing, a habit she'd had since childhood when she was thinking hard. "You really think she was planning to have you declared incompetent?" "I think she was laying the groundwork for that possibility, creating a paper trail of concerns about my ability to live independently." "That's..." Sarah stopped pacing. "That's actually brilliant. In a completely evil way. Your sister-in-law is many things, but she's not stupid. Does David see any of this?" "He's starting to." The conversation about his mother-in-law's visit opened his eyes somewhat. "But he loves Rebecca, and love makes people blind to inconvenient truths. What if he chooses her over you?" I'd been asking myself that question all week. "Then I'll know where I stand. And I'll have protected my assets from someone who sees them as resources to be managed rather than legacy to be honored." That evening, I cooked dinner for Sarah and me. Robert's favorite pot roast with all the trimmings. We ate in the dining room using my good china, the set Rebecca had once suggested I donate because I never entertained anymore. "Remember when David brought Rebecca home for the first time?" Sarah asked, cutting her meat. "Thanksgiving 5 years ago. She complimented everything. The house, the food, my decorating. I thought she was genuinely impressed. I thought she was calculating the property value." I looked at my daughter. "You never said anything. You seemed happy that David had found someone. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid or protective." Sarah took a sip of wine. "But there were little things. The way she asked about Dad's life insurance, how she mentioned that big houses were expensive to maintain, the comments about how I was lucky to have such a practical approach to possessions." "Practical approach? Because I live in a condo and don't keep much stuff." She made it sound like I was smarter than you for not being weighed down by the past. "She's been working at this angle for years. Looks like it. The question is whether David will believe it when you show him the evidence tomorrow." Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood. Sarah helped me prepare coffee and set out pastries, though I doubted anyone would have much appetite for refreshments. David arrived first, looking like he hadn't slept well. Rebecca came with him, dressed in a navy blue dress that made her look professional and conservative. She'd clearly chosen her outfit carefully for this confrontation. "Hello, Martha," she said formally. "Sarah." Her greeting to my daughter was even cooler. We settled in my living room, the same space where Rebecca had criticized my throw pillows and suggested I streamline my photo displays. The trust document sat in a manila folder on my coffee table like a loaded weapon. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "We need to address what happened 3 weeks ago and what it reveals about our family dynamics." "Mom," David started, "I really think we can handle this without..." "Without what? Without honesty? Without consequences?" I opened the folder. "Rebecca, you violated my privacy and stole my belongings. But more importantly, You revealed your true feelings about my independence and your intentions regarding my future. Rebecca's composed expression didn't waver. I've already apologized for not asking permission. I thought I was helping. Let's examine that help, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. I made some calls this week to Goodwill and several other donation centers in Phoenix. Very interesting conversations. Rebecca's face went slightly pale. What kind of conversations? The kind where I asked about donation policies, tracing systems, and whether they keep records of high-value items. Turns out, they're very careful about expensive jewelry and vintage clothing. They have to be, for insurance purposes. I watched Rebecca process this information. What's your point? My point is that when someone donates pearl earrings worth $800 and a vintage wedding dress, those items get special handling. They don't just disappear into the general donation pool. I wouldn't know about any of that, Sarah smiled coldly. Of course you wouldn't. Just like you wouldn't know that the Goodwill manager remembered you specifically because you asked so many questions about their tracking systems. I was just curious. You were covering your tracks, Sarah continued. You wanted to make sure Mom couldn't recover her stolen property. It wasn't stolen. I donated items to charity. Items that didn't belong to you, David said quietly. His voice carried a note I'd never heard before when speaking to his wife. Rebecca turned to him. David, you know I was trying to help your mother. She has too much stuff for one person to manage safely. Do I asked. David, walk through this house with me right now. Show me where I'm unsafe or overwhelmed. David looked around the living room. Clean, organized, comfortable. Mom, your house is fine. But Rebecca doesn't think so. Rebecca thinks I'm a confused old woman who can't manage her own life. Isn't that right, Rebecca? I think you're holding on to the past in ways that aren't healthy. Whose definition of healthy? Yours? Rebecca's composure began to crack. I think anyone looking at this situation objectively would agree that a 73-year-old woman living alone in a 4-bedroom house filled with decades of accumulated possessions might benefit from some assistance with decision-making. Anyone. Like who? Your mother. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. My mother is concerned about the impact this conflict is having on her granddaughters. Your mother came here to convince me that I should be grateful for your intervention. She suggested that I'm too emotionally attached to make practical decisions about my future. Maybe you are. The honesty hung in the air like a challenge. David stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Practical decisions like what, Rebecca? I asked. Like acknowledging that this house is too big for you. Like recognizing that holding on to every memento from the past isn't healthy. Like accepting that you might need help with daily tasks as you get older. Help that you're qualified to provide? Help that your family is positioned to provide? Yes. Even if I don't want that help? Sometimes people don't recognize when they need help. I looked at David. His face had gone very still, the way it used to when he was a child processing something that hurt him. Rebecca, I said carefully, are you suggesting that I'm not competent to make my own decisions? I'm suggesting that objective observers might have legitimate concerns about your ability to live independently as you age. Objective observers like you and your mother? Like anyone who cares about your well-being. Sarah leaned forward. And what would these objective observers recommend? Rebecca glanced at David before answering. A smaller living space, assistance with daily tasks, professional oversight of financial decisions. Professional oversight of my money? I asked. Guidance. To ensure you're not taken advantage of or making impulsive financial choices. Impulsive choices like what? Rebecca hesitated, then seemed to decide she'd gone too far to retreat. Like hiring lawyers over minor family disputes. Like making dramatic changes to estate planning based on emotional reactions. The room went dead silent. David looked back and forth between his wife and me, understanding dawning in his eyes. How do you know about my estate planning? I asked quietly. I don't know anything specific. I'm just saying that emotional decision-making about financial matters isn't always wise for people your age. People my age. People who might not be thinking clearly about long-term consequences. I picked up the manila folder. Speaking of long-term consequences, let me share what I've decided about my estate. Mom, David said urgently, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I removed the trust documents. These papers establish a trust that will control my assets after my death. David, you're still my heir, but with conditions. Rebecca went very still. What kind of conditions? If David is married to you when I die, his inheritance goes into a restricted trust. You'll have no access to the house or my financial assets. The house will be sold, and the proceeds held for Emma and Sophie until they turn 25. You can't do that, Rebecca said immediately. I can, and I have. But there's more. I turned to the second page. If anyone attempts to have me declared mentally incompetent or tries to force me into assisted living against my will, David loses his inheritance entirely. Everything goes to Sarah and the twins. Rebecca's careful composure shattered completely. You vindictive old bitch! The words hit the room like a slap. David jerked back as if he'd been struck. Rebecca, he said sharply, but she was beyond caring about appearances now. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Making spiteful, emotional decisions that hurt your own family. This proves you're not thinking clearly. Does it? Or does it prove I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years? Rebecca stood up, her hands shaking with rage. You're punishing my children for something I did. You're using your money to control David's marriage. I'm protecting my assets from someone who sees them as resources to be managed rather than legacy to be honored. Legacy? This house is full of junk? These boxes of old photos and clothes you never wear? That's not legacy. That's hoarding. And there's the truth, Sarah said quietly. Finally, Rebecca whirled on her. Don't you dare judge me. You live 1,000 miles away and visit twice a year. You have no idea what it's like watching David worry about his mother every single day. David worries because you make him worry, I said. You create problems and then position yourself as the solution. I create problems? You're the one who turned a simple misunderstanding into a legal war. Simple misunderstanding? David's voice was barely controlled. Becca, you stole from my mother. I tried to help her. And this is how she repays me, by trying to destroy our marriage. I'm not trying to destroy anything, I said. I'm trying to protect myself from someone who thinks my life is theirs to manage. Rebecca's face was flushed, her perfect facade completely gone. You know what? Fine. Keep your precious house and your boxes of memories. Keep your money and your spiteful conditions. But don't expect me to pretend that watching you deteriorate is my responsibility. Deteriorate how, exactly? You forget things. You get confused about conversations. You're unsteady on your feet sometimes. David sees it even if he won't admit it. I looked at my son. David, do you think I'm deteriorating? He looked miserable, torn between the two women he loved. Mom, you've had some dizzy spells, and sometimes you seem tired. Tired or confused? Tired? He said firmly. Just tired. Rebecca's expression grew desperate. David, you've said to yourself that she shouldn't be living alone much longer. I said I worry about her. That's not the same thing. It's the beginning of the same thing. And when that time comes, when she really does need help, what then? Are we supposed to pretend this house full of stuff isn't a safety hazard? Are we supposed to ignore the fact that she's too attached to possessions to make rational decisions? Rational decisions like letting you steal from me? Like letting people who love you help you prepare for the future by violating my privacy and throwing away my memories? By helping you let go of things that don't matter anymore so you can focus on what does. I stood up, the trust documents still in my hand. Rebecca, those things matter to me. This house matters to me. My independence matters to me. And if you can't understand that, then you don't understand me at all. I understand that you're scared of change and using your money to force everyone else to enable your fear. I'm using my money to ensure that no one can force changes I don't want. Rebecca grabbed her purse. David, I'm going home. When you're ready to discuss this situation rationally, you know where to find me. She stormed out, leaving the three of us in stunned silence. David sat with his head in his hands. Mom, what have you done? I've protected myself and my legacy from someone who sees both as obstacles to her plans. She's my wife, the mother of my children. And she just called me a vindictive old bitch and suggested I'm mentally deteriorating. Is that the woman you want influencing your daughter's understanding of respect and family? David looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I don't know what to do. You don't have to do anything right now. But you do need to think about what you just heard. Sarah put her hand on David's shoulder. She showed you who she really is, David. The question is whether you're going to believe her. After David left to go home to his angry wife and confused daughters, Sarah and I sat in my quiet living room. Well, she said finally, that went about as well as expected. Better, actually. I thought she'd maintain her composure longer. The vindictive old bitch comment was definitely a tactical error on her part. I laughed despite everything. Your father would have thrown her out of the house the minute she said it. Dad would have seen through her years ago. Your father was a better judge of character than I am. Sarah looked around the living room, at the photos and mementos Rebecca considered clutter. So what happens now? Now we wait to see what David decides. And if he chooses her? Then I'll know I raised a son who values manipulation over truth, and I'll know my assets are protected from someone who would use them against me. That's a pretty cold way to look at it. Rebecca forced me to be cold. She made this about money and control instead of love and respect. Do you think there's any chance she'll back down? Apologize genuinely and try to make amends? I thought about Rebecca's face when I'd revealed the trust conditions, about the fury and calculation I'd seen there. No, I said. She's going to double down. She's going to try to convince David that I'm exactly what she said, a vindictive, old woman using money to control people. And if David believes her, then I'll have my answer about what my son really thinks of me. Sunday passed quietly. David didn't call, which told me he was dealing with the fallout from Rebecca's meltdown. Sarah and I spent the day in my garden, replanting the flower beds for spring and talking about everything except the family crisis. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Emma appeared at my front door, holding her father's hand, her little face serious. Daddy said I should tell you something, she said. I knelt down to her level. What's that, sweetheart? Mommy said you don't love us anymore because she made a mistake. My heart broke a little. Oh, Emma. Grandma Martha loves you and Sophie more than all the stars in the sky. Nothing could ever change that. But you're mad at Mommy. I'm disappointed in Mommy. But that has nothing to do with how much I love you. Emma looked relieved. Sophie was crying because she thought you didn't want to see us anymore. I looked up at David. Where is Sophie? With Rebecca. They had a big fight about bringing Emma here. Rebecca didn't want Emma to visit me. She said it would be confusing for the girls until this situation is resolved. Resolved how? David's face was haggard. I don't know, Mom. I honestly don't know. 2 weeks passed in an uneasy silence. David brought Emma and Sophie over twice. Brief visits where we played in the garden while he sat on the porch looking like a man watching his world crumble. Rebecca never came, and David never mentioned her during these visits. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed David's number, but it was Rebecca's voice on the other end. "Martha, we need to talk." "I thought we said everything that needed saying." "No, we didn't. There are things you don't understand about this situation." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory seemed safer than my house or hers. Rebecca was already seated when I arrived, looking smaller somehow without her perfect suburban backdrop. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore jeans and a faded sweater, the most casual I'd ever seen her. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "What do you want, Rebecca?" She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself. "I want to explain why I did what I did." "I think you explained that quite clearly at our family meeting." "No, I mean really explain. The whole truth." I waited, curious despite myself. "My father left when I was 8, she began. Just disappeared. One day, left my mother with a mortgage she couldn't afford and 2 kids to raise alone." "I'm sorry to hear that." "We lost the house 6 months later. Had to move in with my grandmother, who was already struggling with dementia. My mother worked 2 jobs just to keep us fed, and I spent most of my childhood taking care of my grandmother. And my younger brother." Rebecca's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly around the coffee cup. "When I was 16, my grandmother fell and broke her hip. She was in the hospital for weeks, and while she was gone, my mother and I went through her house. 40 years of newspapers, broken appliances, clothes that hadn't been worn in decades. Rooms so packed with stuff we could barely walk through them. That must have been difficult. It was hell. But worse was coming home from school every day wondering if I'd find her dead under a pile of her own belongings. That's when I learned that holding on to things can become a prison." I began to understand where this was leading, but I let her continue. "My grandmother died the following year. Not from the fall, but from pneumonia she got because she refused to throw away moldy books and papers that were making her sick. She literally chose her possessions over her health." Rebecca looked directly at me for the first time since I'd sat down. "When I met David and saw your house, saw how you held on to every memory, every piece of the past, it triggered something in me. I kept waiting for you to start showing signs like my grandmother did." "Signs of what?" "Of choosing things over people, of prioritizing possessions over safety, of becoming so attached to the past that you couldn't function in the present. And you decided I was heading in that direction?" "I decided I wasn't going to watch David go through what I went through. I wasn't going to let Emma and Sophie have memories of their grandmother buried under piles of stuff she couldn't let go of." Rebecca's explanation was honest, but it only made her actions worse in my mind. "So, you decided to intervene before I became your grandmother?" "I decided to help you avoid becoming her, by stealing from me, by showing you that you could live with less, that letting go of some things wouldn't kill you." I studied her face, looking for manipulation or calculation, but all I saw was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine regret. "Rebecca, do you understand why what you did was wrong?" "I understand that I hurt you. I understand that I violated your trust. But do you understand why it was wrong?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Because they weren't my things to give away. Because they weren't your decisions to make. Because my life isn't your trauma to fix." Rebecca flinched, as if I'd hit her. "That's not what I was doing, isn't it? You saw your grandmother in me and decided to solve the problem before it became a problem. But Rebecca, I'm not your grandmother. And even if I were, I have the right to make my own choices about my own life. Even if those choices are harmful, even then, that's what autonomy means." We sat in silence for several minutes, the coffee shop bustling around us with people living their ordinary lives. "What would it take?" Rebecca asked finally. "What would what take?" "For you to forgive me. For us to find a way back to being a family." I thought about the trust documents sitting in Patricia's office. about the legal walls I'd built to protect myself from exactly this kind of manipulation. It would take you understand that I don't need to be managed or fixed or saved from myself. It would take you accepting that my house, my possessions, my choices are mine to make. And the trust? The conditions about David's inheritance? Those stay in place. Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. Forever? Until I'm convinced that you see me as a person with rights rather than a problem to be solved. And how would I convince you of that? By proving it over time, by respecting my boundaries, by never again making decisions about my life without my permission. What if I think you're making a mistake? What if I see you heading toward something dangerous? Then you talk to me about it. You express your concerns and respect my response. You don't take matters into your own hands. Rebecca nodded slowly. Okay, I can do that. Can you? Because this conversation feels very much like another attempt to manage the situation. You're trying to find the right words to get what you want from me. That's not... She stopped herself. Maybe it is. Maybe I am always trying to manage things. Why? Because chaos scares me. Because watching people I love make choices that seem harmful brings back memories of watching my grandmother destroy herself. But I'm not your grandmother, Rebecca, and I'm not destroying myself. I know that now. Do you? Or do you know that you need to say that to repair the damage you've done? Rebecca's face crumpled slightly. I don't know anymore. I've been trying so hard to prevent one kind of disaster that I created a different one. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt something like sympathy for her. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Rebecca, trauma makes us see threats where they don't exist, but that doesn't give us the right to preemptively strike against those threats. I know. I hope you do. Because David is going to have to choose between us, and I won't compete for my son's loyalty. What does that mean? It means if he chooses you over what's right, I'll accept that choice. But I won't compromise my dignity or my autonomy to make that choice easier for him. We parted that day without resolution, but with something resembling understanding. Rebecca had shown me her wounds, and I'd shown her my boundaries. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. The answer came 2 days later, when David appeared at my door alone, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past. Mom, can we talk? I made coffee, and we sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd helped him with homework and listened to his teenage heartbreaks and celebrated his college acceptance. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, he said. About what? Becca did. About what you've done in response, about what kind of family we want to be, and what have you decided? I've decided that what Becca did was inexcusable. No matter what her reasons were, no matter what her trauma was, she had no right to violate your privacy and take your things. I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. But Mom, the trust conditions feel like punishment. Like you're using your inheritance to force me to choose between you and my wife. I'm using my inheritance to protect myself from future violations. The conditions only matter if Rebecca tries to control my life again, but they put me in an impossible position. If I stay married to her, I lose part of my inheritance. If I divorce her, I lose my family. David, you'll inherit everything I have as long as Rebecca doesn't try to have me declared incompetent or force me into care I don't want. That's not punishment. That's protection. But what if you really do need care someday? What if there comes a time when living alone isn't safe for you? Then we'll discuss it as a family and make decisions together. But those decisions will be made with me, not for me. David was quiet for a long moment. Becca wants to go to marriage counseling. She wants us to work through this as a couple. That's between you and Rebecca. She also wants to start family counseling. All of us together. To what end? To find a way forward that works for everyone. I considered this. I'm willing to participate in counseling as long as the goal is establishing healthy boundaries, not convincing me to accept Rebecca's management of my life. The goal would be rebuilding trust. Trust has to be earned, David. Rebecca can't counsel her way out of accountability. 3 weeks later, we all sat in Dr. Jennifer Martinez's office in downtown Phoenix. The therapist was a middle-aged Hispanic woman with kind eyes and no tolerance for manipulation. Let's start with everyone stating what they want to get out of these sessions, she said. Rebecca went first. I want to rebuild my relationship with Martha and find a way for our family to move forward together. Sarah had flown in for this session. I want my mother to feel safe and respected in her own home and family. David looked tired. I want my wife and my mother to find a way to coexist peacefully. And you, Martha? Dr. Martinez asked. I want assurance that my autonomy and dignity will be respected going forward. Dr. Martinez made notes. Rebecca, can you explain what happened from your perspective? Rebecca told her story. The trauma with her grandmother, her fears about Martha's future, her decision to intervene preemptively. She spoke honestly about her motivations, but still seemed to be looking for understanding rather than taking full accountability. And Martha, how did Rebecca's actions affect you? They made me realize that someone I trusted saw my life as a problem to be managed rather than a reality to be respected. They forced me to take legal action to protect myself from future violations. Tell me about this legal action. I explained the trust and its conditions. Dr. Martinez's expression remained neutral, but I could see her processing the implications. Rebecca, how do you feel about the trust conditions? I think they're punitive. I think Martha is using her money to control David's marriage. Are you concerned about David's inheritance from a financial perspective? Rebecca hesitated. I'm concerned about the message it sends about our family dynamics. What message is that? That one mistake can permanently damage relationships. That forgiveness isn't possible. Dr. Martinez turned to me. Martha, are the trust conditions punitive? They're protective. They ensure that my assets can't be used against me and that my granddaughters will benefit regardless of family conflicts. Could you see modifying them if Rebecca demonstrates sustained behavioral change? Possibly. But it would take time and consistent proof that she respects my autonomy. We met every other week for 3 months. Slowly, painfully, we worked through the layers of hurt and manipulation and fear. Rebecca began to see how her trauma had driven her to violate my boundaries. I began to understand the genuine terror that had motivated her actions, even while maintaining that terror didn't excuse them. David learned to see his wife's manipulation tactics and his own role in enabling them. Sarah learned to trust that I could handle my own battles without her constantly riding to my rescue. The breakthrough came in our 8th session when Dr. Martinez asked Rebecca a direct question. If Martha chooses to keep every possession she owns and live in her current house until she dies, can you accept that choice even if you disagree with it? Rebecca was quiet for a full minute. Yes, she said finally. It's her life and her choice. Even if you think she's making a mistake? Even then. And Martha, if Rebecca demonstrates consistent respect for your boundaries over time, would you consider modifying the trust conditions? I looked at Rebecca, seeing something different in her face than I'd seen before. Acceptance, maybe. Or resignation, but also something that might have been respect. Yes, I said. I would. 6 months later, I sat in James Henderson's office with new trust documents. The inheritance restrictions remained, but I'd added a provision. If Rebecca could demonstrate 2 years of respecting my autonomy and boundaries, the conditions would be lifted. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was something more practical, a recognition that families are complicated and that healing takes time. Today, a year after Rebecca stole my clothes and donated my memories, we have Sunday dinners again. Rebecca compliments my cooking and helps with the dishes, but she no longer comments on my housekeeping or suggests improvements to my life. She still asks about my health, but now she accepts my answers instead of interpreting them as evidence of decline. When I mention feeling tired, she offers to help with tasks rather than suggesting I can't handle them myself. David has learned to see his wife's controlling tendencies for what they are, and he's learned to protect our relationship from them. He still loves Rebecca, but he no longer allows her concerns about me to override his own judgment. Emma and Sophie visit regularly, and I tell them stories about their grandfather while showing them his fishing jacket and my wedding dress. They understand that these aren't just old things taking up space, they're connections to people and moments that shaped their family. The trust documents still sit in Patricia's office, a legal reminder that respect must be maintained, but I'm hopeful that someday they won't be necessary. Rebecca will never understand why I keep Robert's cologne on my dresser, or why I refuse to donate the ceramic owl his mother gave us. But she's learned that understanding isn't required, only respect. And respect, I've learned, is something worth fighting for, even when it costs you everything else. My clothes were never recovered from Goodwill. The pearl earrings Robert gave me are probably adorning someone else's ears now. But I learned something more valuable than any possession. I learned that I'm strong enough to protect myself from people who love me but don't respect me. And that knowledge is worth more than all the donated memories in the world. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need boundaries, consequences, and the courage to enforce them both. Rebecca learned that violating trust has a price. David learned that loyalty has limits. And I learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. The house still holds 40 years of memories. My closet still contains clothes Rebecca would consider excessive. My jewelry box still holds treasures she would call clutter. But now I know that no one can take them from me without consequences. And that knowledge lets me sleep peacefully in the home I've fought to keep, surrounded by the memories I've fought to protect. Some battles are worth fighting, even against the people you love. Especially against the people you love, because they're the ones with the power to hurt you most. And when you win those battles, you don't just keep your possessions, you keep your dignity. And dignity, once lost, is much harder to recover than donated clothes. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And, hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.